Hey there, I'm Lauren Jackson, your APQS Central Florida rep and educator, and I wanted to share with you some tips and tricks for how you can use our brand new Ellie. She's an 18-inch throat long arm style machine, and she is on what we call a Halo table. Your APQS Halo table comes equipped with many clamps. This top bar up here is very low to the machine head itself, but that means that you don't have a lot of clearance, so you want to be sure that if your needle plate doesn't quite clear this bar, that you have enough extra fabric to reach your quilt top. So you're going to make your quilt back about 8 to 10 inches longer than your quilt top on both the top and the bottom. That's because your quilt back is going to act kind of as the leaders and the quilt backing of your project. You want to make sure that you have a straight edge to your quilt back. This is going to help you load your quilt more straight and more even, and it'll give you kind of a good frame of reference as you're clamping. I like to load from the back of this machine. So when you begin loading, you're going to load with your backing right side to the floor like you would on any long arm machine. So you have all your seams facing the ceiling. Then you're going to lay your fabric across the top of your bar. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the edge of my quilt back with this back edge of the bar. And that's going to give me a nice straight line. I'll usually put on my first and my last clamp, and then I'll put the rest on in between. So you can see that I've put these top clamps on the top of the bar, and it's pushing the fabric down to keep it in line with the bottom of the bar. This is going to keep your fabric, your whole quilt sandwich, kind of level with this bar here closest to your belly, so that when you're quilting you don't get a lot of bounce. Once you've kind of stabilized the front and you're making sure that it hasn't shifted left or right, okay, let's just make sure it's good to go. You can then add your side clamps, and your side clamps are pretty dainty. Okay, they've got little twist open and twist close righty-tighty functioning, and you're just going to slide the fabric right in between the little clamp. Okay, once the clamp's on, you're going to pull the bungee tight and push on the little bungee clamp and push it all the way to the edge of the frame so that you can have your quilt sandwich nice and taut. Now the goal for your bungees is to just have it, like I said, nice and taut, not tight. And if you pull too hard on one side or the other, you'll end up shifting your fabric. So just make sure that you're kind of holding the extra slack. This is just a supportive thing for your quilt sandwich. It's not meant to pull it super tight. I'm going to move my machine as close to the edge as possible so that it's out of my way. And I'm going to take my next piece for my quilt sandwich, and that's my batting. I'm going to line up my batting even with my edge, and I'm going to lay it over the front as if to float it. Give it a smooth, and then add your quilt top. Now you may or may not get clearance of your needle plate from the clamps in the bar, and so your machine's really only going to be able to go up to where the needle plate is. So make sure that your quilt top is within that area so you don't have to hit any clamps while you're quilting or basting. Okay? If you want to get a plumb line for success, which gives you a nice straight line, you can put down your horizontal clamp on the left-hand side of your machine when facing the needle, and you can stitch down a straight line to line your quilt top up with. And then line up your quilt top edge with that line. From here you can keep your quilt back floating if you want. I did not put enough clamps on there to keep it floating, so I'm going to take off all of my clamps one by one, make sure that I've got my quilt back pulled nice and tight. I only had a beginning, middle, and end, and I'm going to add a few more clamps for stability. Before I begin quilting, I want to map out my quiltable space. Your machine is only going to take the head as far as the needle plate will go to the back edge, so you have about I don't know, about 2 inches from the bar to where the needle's going to go. And if you go all the way to the side, your carriage that your machine sits on is going to hit the side wall before it actually gets to the very edge of your quilt. That takes up about 4 inches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some painter's tape and I'm going to mark kind of my quiltable space so that I know where that's at. Okay, so visually what I'm seeing is that I want to stay with the blue tape inside. So I don't want to go past where my blue tape lines are. So I don't want to go above the edge of this blue tape line. And I don't want to go past the edge of that blue tape line. I know my edges are well within, but where this is really going to help me is going to be across the bottom of the quilt frame, so that I can visually see, okay, I want to stop before I get to the edge of my clamps because I'm going to run out of quiltable space. A great tip would be to create what's called a shock cord, and you can use a bungee and a D-ring to create something that you can elastic around the frame and then pull it all the way over to the other edge of the frame. And then you'll know that as you approach this line, you need to stop quilting because this is the edge of your quiltable space. It's important that I still baste down the edges of my quilt top so that they don't fold or move as I'm quilting. So now that my quilt is basted, all of the edges are down, I can safely quilt without worrying about my foot catching on any of the edges of the fabric. Now that I've completed one section, I want to set up to advance into the next section. Now, I like to try to pull this straight so that it keeps my backing, a little bit less wrinkled on the back. It kind of flattens it out as it goes. You want to make sure that when you clamp it down, you leave 2 or 3 inches of the quilting showing, okay? I like to treat this as if it were a regular long arm for smaller projects. So I'm going to take my batting in my top and I'm going to flip it over as if I'm just dealing with the backing. This way I can get a clear view of how straight or crooked my backing was from pulling it up. And I'm just going to put a clamp to kind of hold it down. Okay, I won't put one in the middle, that one was a little hard to remove. And then I'm going to pull my batting and my top apart. We're going to smooth out the batting so that it's nice and smooth with our back. You don't want to feel any wrinkles. Okay. And then we'll do the same with our top. We'll get it nice and straightened out. Smooth it out, feel for any wrinkles. I like to kind of grab a handful of the fabric and pull it taut. Place it in the middle. Be sure that you're reusing those tape markers to show you where the edges of your quilt should be. Do not forget to finish securing your sides with your side clamps. Remember, taut, not tight. If you're using a shock cord to show the bottom of your quiltable space, you can always put that on now. Before you continue quilting, you have all of this excess fabric now at the top of the machine, towards the back neck of the machine head, and you need to be able to secure it up here somehow so you don't accidentally stitch it to the back of your quilt, and so your machine doesn't accidentally get caught on all of the threads and fabric that are right here holding it on. So you're going to utilize the thinner C-clamps, and they're going to clamp around the PVC clamps like so. They're going to get stuck in that little lip, and these are going to securely hold your quilt top your quilt sandwich that you've just quilted. I'm gonna roll it up. You can use as many or as little as you need to control it as you're going. The bigger your quilt is, the heavier your quilt is, the more of these C-clamps and clamps you're gonna need to use. If at any point you don't love the height of your table, feels too high, feels too low, take advantage of the option that you have to raise or lower your quilting machine. The front bar that you're utilizing to quilt should be right in line with your belly button. So make sure that you check the height as you go so that the bar is right where it should be. We're gonna baste our sides and then we're going to begin quilting. I want you to see that I left about 2 to 3 inches of quilted quilt exposed so that as I come up and quilt it on my next pass, I've got room to get in there without hitting any of these clamps and without my needle plate hitting this back bar. Now I've completed my second row of quilting. So I'm about halfway through this quilt panel. I'll probably have to advance 2 more times before I'm done. So I'm gonna go ahead and advance this and complete the next 2 sections, and we'll come back when I get right to the end. Let's stabilize the backing so that we can clamp our sides without the fabric shifting and smooth out our batting material. Then we're going to go ahead and secure the entire bottom so that it's nice and taut across the machine frame. Then we're going to baste across the bottom edge and up from the center out on both sides of the quilt top. This will minimize the amount of shifting, tucks, and puckers that you can get from the quilt top by the time you get to the bottom. From here, we're going to go ahead and quilt the remainder of our quilt top. I like to quilt from the left to the right just because that's easy enough for me. And we'll quilt all the way over till we get to the final edge of the batting and secure our stitches. Then we'll be able to remove our quilt top from the frame. All right, now that we're done, we can get into trimming and binding in our usual preferred methods. Thank you guys for joining me. I'm Lauren, an APQS sales representative here in Central Florida and educator.